Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Paul Snover. I'm the Associate Scientific Director at the Ocean Frontier Institute, and welcome to a very special event that we are honored to be hosting about Canada's response to the new ocean agenda announced yesterday by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Blue Economy. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is one of 14 world leaders on the panel, and they have all committed to sustainably managing 100% of the ocean area under each of their national jurisdictions by 2025. This work is being guided under 5 pillars: ocean health, ocean wealth, ocean finance, ocean equity, and ocean knowledge. Each member country is holding a launch event, and we're privileged that today's Ocean Forum is Canada's launch event. Before we go any further, the Ocean Frontier Institute acknowledges that our physical offices and our research activities are located on diverse ancestral and traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. We recognize and offer our respect to those Inuit, First Nation, and Métis people and their communities. The high-level panel strategy document is called Transformation for a Sustainable Blue Economy, a vision for protection, production, and prosperity. Let's hear from these world leaders, including Prime Minister Trudeau, about the importance of this new agenda in this video.
The ocean gives us life. It feeds us, entertains us, connects us, inspires us, and powers our success.
I grew up in a beachside suburb of Sydney, and it was very often the case that I'd head down to the beach after school with my mates. It is so much part of our way of life.
From an early age, you learn how to swim, you learn how to fish. That's a very important part of our culture and tradition.
Indigenous peoples have lived in harmony with our natural world and our oceans for millennia, and we need to draw from their expertise on how to better support and cherish and steward our oceans.
We are sailors, we are fishermen, we are industrialists, we are dependent on the oceans.
But today, the ocean's health is off track. At a time when we are already looking to recover from the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, we understand how vulnerable we are to health and other shocks.
It's important that we consider ocean as a partner. Life on Earth as we know it depends on the health of the ocean.
Research shows that a healthier ocean is a smart investment that will deliver social, health and economic and environmental benefits.
The health of our Earth and the health of our people are linked. They're totally intertwined.
我々の未来は海とともにあります。
Nuestra visión es encontrar un balance entre la conservación y el uso sustentable de los recursos del mar.
I believe we can choose a triple win: a win for people, a win for nature and our economy.
Where effective protection, sustainable production, and equitable prosperity go hand in hand.
The Ocean Panel, composed of 14 serving world leaders, has put forward a new ocean action agenda.
Nous invitons à assurer une gestion durable de 100% des zones océaniques se trouvant à l'intérieur des limites de nos territoires.
Listening to science, listening to research, listening to best practices that we have seen work for many other countries.
Sustainable ocean action should be a cornerstone of national and global policies.
Pengelolaan laut yang berkelanjutan akan mendukung pencapaian SDGs.
We are looking for a reason to believe that in 2021 and beyond, we can not only fix what COVID did to the world, but also fix the problems we already had on our plate.
Climate change, pollution, ecosystem collapse, economic instability, unhealthy diets, poverty, and unsustainable practices across all sectors.
The answer is a healthy ocean with sustainability at its core.
Oceans may separate us physically, but they can also bring humanity together for a healthy, prosperous future.
El esfuerzo por una economía oceánica sostenible y sustentable tiene que ser multisectorial y multilateral.
We call on more world leaders and other partners to join us in turning the 100% goal into reality and treat the oceans as the solutions for the future.
The ocean gives us so much, let's give it 100%.
Well, wonderful. As you can see, a very passionate and a very timely plea, and also quite international in focus. I'd like to introduce my fellow participants for today's event, OFI CEO and Scientific Director, Dr. Anya Waite.
Hello.
Catherine Blewett, OFI's Chief Strategic Engagement Officer. And a very warm welcome to our special guests, Karin Kemper, Global Director for the Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy Global Practice at the World Bank. And finally, the Honourable Bernadette Jordan, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. Minister, welcome, and thank you for allowing us to host this Canadian launch event called How Ocean Protection Can Fuel a New Blue Economy and Drive Prosperity. Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. I'm joining you today from Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I want to thank the Ocean Frontier Institute for hosting today. I'm so pleased to share the stage with Dr. Karin Kemper as well. We're having this discussion at an opportune moment. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the interconnectivity between human activity and the health of our environment. And it has underscored the need for coordinated global response to a global issue. The issues facing our oceans and the opportunities that our oceans present are global in nature, and Canada is taking a lead role in the global response. Yesterday, Prime Minister Trudeau presented Canada as one of the 14 leaders of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy to the panel's new roadmap for Ocean Action Agenda, Transformations for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, a vision for protection, production, and prosperity. The vision outlines actions countries can take to transition towards a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable ocean economy. It's a roadmap outlining how nations can build across the 5 key areas: ocean wealth, ocean health, ocean equity, ocean knowledge, and ocean finance. And it will be the basis for Canada's Blue Economy strategy. Many ocean-based industries have the potential to outperform the global economy. The employment opportunities that it can create for citizens around the world is staggering. Thousands of fish stocks around the world are at risk. Reversing this trend through robust protection and restoration efforts could have monumental impacts on our food supply chains. The ocean does not discriminate who it shares its resources with. Many developing nations are geographically well positioned to benefit from the stronger blue economy. But we need to work together to ensure that the least developed economies have access to the technology and have the financial capacity to benefit from ocean resources. Yesterday, our Prime Minister urged other world leaders to join in this vision and commit their nations to developing a set of priority actions necessary to building a sustainable blue economy. In support of this, and to further the work of the Oceans Plastic Charter and the Charlevoix Blueprint for Healthy Oceans, Seas, and Resilient Coastal Communities, I am pleased to announce today the Government of Canada will contribute $4 million to the World Bank's Pro-Blue Fund, bringing Canada's total investment to Pro-Blue to $69 million. These funds will help developing countries to produce sustainable ocean plans, or as we like to call them, blue economy strategies. Our investment in Pro-Blue and our participation in the high-level panel bring a strong record for oceans protection. Canada has invested significant resources and efforts to protect our oceans. Oceans was a key theme of Canada's 2018 G7 presidency. We co-hosted the world's first international conference on the sustainable blue economy with Kenya and Japan, a vital step in helping nations transition towards a more sustainable blue economy. In 2018, Canada's commitment to ocean protection was outlined in the Charlevoix Blueprint on Healthy Oceans and Seas and the Resilient Coastal Communities. In July of this year, we joined the United Kingdom's Global Ocean Alliance, along with 21 other countries, to advocate for ambitious ocean action to protect at least 30% of the world's oceans by 2030, a target that the Ocean Panel believes into. Canada is a leader on the world stage. And we're leading by example. Domestically, we've surpassed our marine conservation targets to protect 10% of our oceans by the end of 2020. We're almost at 14% now, and we've set new targets of 25% by 2025, working towards 30% by 2030. And through our $1.5 billion Oceans Protection Plan, we're creating a world-leading marine safety system, restoring and protecting marine and coastal ecosystems and habitats, enhancing environmental and local emergency response, and strengthening our ability to trade safely with confidence. Now we're ready to become a global leader in the sustainable blue economy. Canadians already understand that the environment and the economy must go hand in hand. When we invest in ocean conservation and protection, we're investing in people, in communities, and in industries that rely on them as well. We see this over and over again with our ocean industries. Our seafood sector will continue to grow and create jobs from coast to coast to coast if we sustainably manage our fish stocks. Tidal energy, energy from the sea, has the potential to generate millions for our economy if we invest in it responsibly and build it wisely. Canada's blue economy is strong, but it can and it will be stronger. Our ocean industries account for nearly $32 billion annually in GDP and 300,000 jobs across fisheries and aquaculture, energy, shipping, tourism, and recreation. But we need to grow these areas in a smart and responsible way and in a sustainable way. Canada is the second largest country in the world, surrounded by 3 oceans and nearly 244,000 kilometers of coastlines. Yet we're 8th in terms of contributing to the global ocean economy. The Prime Minister has asked me to lead, with the support of a number of my cabinet colleagues, the development of a comprehensive blue economy strategy. Our government wants more Canadians to benefit from the incredible opportunities that lie within our oceans. This strategy will be anchored in a vision of protection, production, and prosperity. It will support advances in ocean innovation and take advantage of the latest scientific findings and best practices while steadily building prosperity and conserving our oceans for future generations. In Ottawa, we can write policies and make plans, but the work is done by brilliant Canadians from coast to coast to coast who share our vision of a thriving, healthy ocean and a sustainable ocean economy. The next stage for Canada's blue economy strategy will begin very early in the new year, with a series of discussions with the provinces and territories, Indigenous peoples, industry, and environmental stakeholders, and all Canadians. The online information launch is just around the corner, which will guide our consultation sessions with the public, so I invite you to stay tuned and get ready. For centuries, humans have harnessed the opportunities oceans have to offer. It's only recently that we're beginning to understand what we could gain from doing this sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. This is wonderful news on this new financial investment. It's also great to see such a significant commitment to this cause and also this new strategy. This topic, of course, is very near and dear to all of us, so really wonderful news all around. Catherine, you're in a unique position. You recently joined OFI following your role with Government of Canada, where you were Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and Canada's representative for this international high-level panel for a sustainable blue economy. Plus, previous to that, as Canada's Deputy Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, you led the development and implementation of key fisheries legislation between June 2016 and December 2018. So what can you add to this introduction?
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to everybody who is taking time out of their day to join us this morning. Let me just start by saying the minister's frame is exactly the right perspective for Canada. It was an enormous privilege, actually, to serve as the Sherpa for the high-level panel and the Prime Minister's representative as the process got underway. I just wanted to share a few observations, if I might. They'll be candid and just a couple of reflections. The first thing is Canada really was invited to be part of the panel because of its emerging leadership on oceans. The ministers outlined some of the pieces. Canada made oceans a cornerstone of its G7 presidency, and that made a big, big difference. And it was backed up not just by talk, but it was also backed up by resources. The minister also talked about our work with Kenya and with Japan. That actually brought Canada, we brought Africa into a really important global conversation on sustainable economy. So one of the things, as the high-level panel went through, science was absolutely a cornerstone. Throughout the 2 years, the panel, we actually commissioned 16 different scientific papers, and they would all be accessible to folks online. You know, the breadth of the topics, whether it was protein from the ocean, marine transportation, illegal and unregulated fishing, marine spatial planning. The work, the recommendations that world leaders have come out with is backed up by science, and that is transformational. The other thing that I was reflecting on thinking about this launch, and it's so awesome it's actually here today, you know, we talked to citizens from all over the planet. And as we worked with colleagues in Asia, Africa, Europe, small island states in the Caribbean, you know, the imperatives and the challenges, they're very, very similar. You know, for ocean nations, there is a real and a pretty dynamic tension between economies because we depend on the ocean. The economies, the employment possibilities, and the flip side is then the need to protect that resource to make sure we've got a sustainable opportunity going forward. So there's no one size fits all. I think that's the thing. Every nation state, you know, grapples with the challenge. And when you think about it, the ocean, if the ocean was an economy, if it was a country, it'd be the 7th largest country in the world. So the GDP is massive. And so to sustain that future economic activity, we have to do it sustainably. I have to say, you know, one of the big transformations coming out of the report today, it is about giving the ocean 100%. So 100% managing the ocean area under national jurisdiction. Every country is going to do it differently. Everybody is going to bring a different approach to it. And I think as my concluding comment, I am just so delighted to hear Minister Jordan's plan in terms of the consultation on Canada's blue economy. It's exactly the right way to approach it, right? It's a national conversation. It has to include regions, Indigenous communities, provinces. We are a country, a federation of actually different ecosystems. So again, thank you, everybody. The Ocean Frontier Institute really is so grateful to be part of this conversation, and we look forward to rolling up our sleeves and leaning in as we go. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Catherine. And I'll mention that we welcome all of our audience to send questions into the Q&A, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. In any case, these presentations give us quite a good overview of the Canadian perspective on this new agenda. But now let's look a little bit more internationally. Karin Kemper is the Global Director for Environment, Natural Resources and Blue Economy at the World Bank, and they're a key participant in this endeavor. Karin, over to you.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone, and thank you for having me here today at the Ocean Forum and at the Canadian launch of the outcomes of the high-level panel. And bonjour tout le monde, je vous remercie de m'accueillir au Forum Océan. As Paul said, my name is Karin Kemper, and I'm the Global Director at the World Bank for Environment, Natural Resources and Blue Economy. And we are really very proud that we do have blue economy in our name and under our purview. And it is, as was pointed out by various in the panel, it is in these recent years that we have noticed how important the blue economy is and how important it is that we do give 100% to the ocean. And so the bank is very much in that. We all know that the oceans are worth celebrating. They support our economies, the livelihoods, and the health of our planet. Globally, 1 in 10 livelihoods depends on fisheries. And women make up half of the workforce in fisheries when we count in processing and trading in fish. And of course, the oceans are also the largest carbon sink on the planet. So if we want to take advantage of all the wonderful value that the oceans and coastal areas have to offer, we need to figure out how to do that sustainably. And the idea of the blue economy is that we can grow livelihoods using maritime and coastal resources as long as we make sure that the underlying ecosystems aren't depleted to generate those incomes. The blue economy approach is predicated upon three major points. We need healthy oceans, we need sustainable ocean activities, and these activities need to be integrated. And integrated and sustainable ocean planning is therefore key, as was already pointed out by Minister Jordan, and in the context of the work, as we heard from Catherine, around the high-level panel on oceans. And it was great to hear that Canada, again, as so many other times, wants to lead the way in starting a blue economy planning process. Now, at the World Bank, to further this blue economy agenda, in 2018, we launched ProBlue at the World Bank. It's a multi-donor fund, but more than a fund, it's actually a partnership that brings key players to the table and that addresses issues such as the management of fisheries and aquaculture, marine pollution, including litter and plastics, and working with governments to manage their marine and coastal resources in an integrated way. ProBlue has turned into a very important and innovative partnership. And at the World Bank, we are really very honored to house it. And I would like to thank Minister Jordan for Canada's generous contribution to ProBlue and for your leadership and support on this priority. And indeed, Canada is actually the biggest contributor to ProBlue among the multi-country partnership. And we will be very pleased to put the additional funds that Minister Jordan talked about in her speech to bring it to bear on following up on the work on the high-level panel, especially with regard to integrated ocean planning activities. Now, of course, we have COVID-19. And it's a pandemic that has had devastating effects in so many ways. And in the ocean sector, just like every other sector in the global economy, it has affected many people in many sectors through this crisis. It has taken lives, destroyed livelihoods, and it has wrecked ocean economies, affecting those who depend on oceans the most globally. It actually threatens to reverse development gains that we have made in recent years, and it threatens to put people back into poverty. The latest World Bank projections suggest that by 2021, up to 150 million more people will have fallen into extreme poverty in the context of COVID-19. And if unaddressed, climate change could drive a further 68 million to 132 million people into extreme poverty by 2030. These are big numbers at a global level. And to give you a couple of examples from some sectors, for instance, the tourism sector has been significantly impacted and will take a very long time to recover. Since 2000, global travel and tourism revenues had nearly tripled, with the sector contributing about 10% of global GDP. But in a lot of countries, tourism value chains have now paused or stopped. And a recent World Bank analysis compared tourism dependence and used a tourism risk resilience score. And the study found that there are 44 countries in the world where tourism contributes 10% or more to GDP, and that have high or severe tourism resilience risk, with 15 of those being low and lower income poor countries. And in addition, there are 12 small island countries which all derive more than 40% of their GDP from travel and tourism, and they are likely to experience very severe economic impacts. And that is what we are hearing in our conversations. Shipping has also slowed down, and the lives of hundreds of thousands of crew members have been upended. Globally, 90% of goods are transported by ship, and the knock-on effect is undeniable, and especially for small island developing states that are completely dependent on shipping for goods and foods. So we think that one needs to put a blue lens on recovery and on growth. We find that countries have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make blue economy investments that deliver both short-term goals like jobs, economic growth, recovery, as well as longer-term development of objectives such as decarbonization, pollution management, and circular economy approaches, as well as, of course, natural resources management and biodiversity conservation. So I look very much forward to discussing more on the blue economy and the blue recovery in the continued session today. Thank you.
That's great, Karin. Thank you so much. So it seems we're all in violent agreement on the challenges and needs for the global ocean. So now how do we get there? Anya, a lot of this lines up with our work here at the Ocean Frontier Institute, where we unite Dalhousie Memorial and UPEI with national and international partners, including DFO, to focus research and education in support of a safe and sustainable ocean. In many ways, the stars seem to be aligning on a new ocean focus and shared vision. Anya?
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to Minister Jordan and Karin Kemper and Catherine, and to you yourself for the work so far. I wanted to just reiterate that we are very honored at the Ocean Frontier Institute to be hosting this event. This role for us aligns with our catalyst role, where we believe that science has to be the cornerstone of policy and that conversation is a critical one going forward. And OFI is an alliance of Canadian universities, all with strong ocean portfolios, and we act as a catalyst between research and our government partners and industry partners. We bring together three core elements, which we think are going to be critical in this conversation going ahead, which is, first of all, the cornerstone scientific expertise, our links with industry, and then a national mandate to really inform policy. So Catherine made the comment about the ocean economy would be the 7th largest in the world, worth trillions of dollars. And I think that this, the blue economy concept is a great approach to the, us understand the economics derived from the ocean that include transportation, fisheries, and eventually more and more offshore wind, but also coastal tourism, and understanding about disposal and plastics. The high-level panel approach is that we add value to the already valuable ocean economy if we pursue it sustainably. But here, the devil is in the detail. It's the science of how we do that that matters. How do we make sure that the value flows to those other sectors? How do we take that concept of natural wealth beyond GDP, the natural capital of the ocean, and actually ensure mechanistically that what we do makes that happen? So it's the mechanisms that we as scientists and researchers are really interested in. For example, we often hear, as soon as people talk about ocean sustainability, they immediately say, oh, well, you're going to slap more MPAs up. And of course, MPAs are an answer, but definitely not the only answer, and answers are different for each region. One of the critical questions we as scientists want to focus on and answer is, how long do we have? So we, for example, focus on the function of the ocean. What is the ocean doing to maintain the homeostasis of the climate? The ocean holds 50 times the carbon and 100 times the heat of the atmosphere. And that carbon has to stay there. So it doesn't matter what we do. If all that carbon is suddenly released, we're going to be swamped by it. So the scientific challenge then is to actually craft the questions so that they can be answered and deliver solutions for policymakers. And that's going to be a challenge for us going forward, but we're ready to step up to it. I think world leaders are pushing for actions to do this all in a sustainable way. And we know that commerce is going to happen in the ocean. We want to ask the question, how do we facilitate the value streams so that when we have sustainability, we get economic value out of it, and then that we also get that other level of value, the community health, the community actions on top of that. And part of that, of course, means we have to really reinvent our conversations with coastal communities and Indigenous peoples, and that certainly is a strong part of the mandate going forward. And then the question is, for goals like the 30% in 2030, do we have enough time? This is a quantitative question with a scientific answer. Let's tackle it. We have important bodies of water off Canada, for example, like the Labrador Sea, which is a bigger carbon sink than the Amazon rainforest. How do we manage our coastal ocean? How do we manage our regional oceans and understand them so that they can be part of our carbon neutrality strategy and that we can make sure that Canada really moves forward in the right way? So I think as an international conversation, this is probably one of the most important ones we have. Once we stop having our eye on the COVID ball, which is super, super important. I mean, I can't imagine anything more important right now. However, the longer term health and safety of humans depends entirely on the ocean. The ocean is our climate. If we can't support sustainable use of the ocean, then saving ourselves from COVID only to jump into the turmoil of massive change globally and all the disruptive economic forces that that's going to unleash, what's the point of that? Let's get through COVID and into a sustainable future for all of us. Thank you. Paul, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Anya. So Canada, of course, recently committed to conserving 25% of our ocean by 2025 and 30% by 2030. These are very ambitious conservation targets, but they will offer a central tool for the goal of sustaining 100% of our ocean by 2030, which of course also means a healthy global ocean. Making sure that the 30% subset helps sustain the remaining 70% for productive fisheries and for other human benefits will require a combination of strong natural and social science to identify where to place these conservation areas for maximum impact. An important question that scientists in OFI and more broadly in Atlantic Canada and beyond are already working on. So knowing that different groups are landing on the same challenge certainly points to their importance. I noticed that we're starting to get questions rolling in, so that's great. So let's shift gears just a little bit. I'd like us to go through these 5 pillars and discuss with our panelists why these must be addressed, how Canada and other countries are addressing them, and the potential benefits for citizens when governments throw their support behind these priority areas. So let's start with ocean wealth and ocean health. We know that many ocean-based industries have the potential to outperform the growth of the global economy, both in terms of additional value and also employment. We also know that human activity threatens the ocean's ability to regenerate and provide sustainably for people around the world. So what are some of the key growth opportunities that you see in ocean industries, and what needs to be done to ensure oceans and their ecosystems remain healthy and robust for generations? Minister Jordan, would you like to start a discussion on this one?
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. You know, there's so much you can say here because there's so many things that we can be doing. I think I'm going to focus on 3 areas specifically when it comes to ocean health and ocean wealth. You know, it's extremely important for our people that we make sure that we develop things sustainably. For example, I'm going to use aquaculture, which is oftentimes a controversial topic, but it's also one that we know that 50% of the food the seafood that's consumed worldwide is from aquaculture. We know that this is an extremely important industry. It's one that has to be that can develop and grow, but we need to make sure that we do it sustainably. There has to be transparency. There has to be the science. There has to be, you know, we need to make sure that there's local governance and priorities in place whenever we're developing that industry. But we know it's something that is extremely important. The other one is the wild catch fisheries. You know, we're seeing a huge decline in fishing in our wild stocks. And Canada was very proud to actually add into our Fisheries Act plans to rebuild stocks. That's actually now part of the law. We have to have development plans to rebuild stocks that are declining. We're working on rebuilding plans now with the intention that, you know, it's not enough to conserve what we have. We have to grow it to abundance. And in order to do that, you know, and when we do that, we're opening up so many new opportunities. So we want to make sure that it's not just about sustaining and it's not just about conserving, it's about growth. So wild fish stocks are going to be a huge priority for us as we go forward. And of course, you know, I mean, we also in Atlantic Canada have the Ocean Supercluster that many of you are very familiar with, which is driving innovation in ocean tech. This is something that I think is going to be critical as we go forward to make sure that we're on the right track in terms of the science that Anya had mentioned and how important it is on the decision makings. You know, I mean, as I've said, you know, we can make all the policies, but we need to have the science to back up what we're doing, and the innovation and the tech, and seeing these commercial industries come together with science and with universities and you know, academia to drive innovation is going to be key as we go forward to make sure that we are addressing a lot of the concerns that we're hearing, but also making sure that we're doing it in the right way.
Thank you. Definitely an exciting time for the ocean. Would anyone else like to comment on this question? Karin, you've demuted.
Yeah. Yes, Paul, picking up from what Minister Jordan just said, the key thing is that in the long term, there is really no trade-off between economic growth of the oceanic sectors and sustainability. There may, in the beginning, depending on what one tries to address, there may be short-term trade-offs, and that is what governments need to see on how to address these short-term effects. But in the long term, if we all want to prosper, we need to have healthy and prosperous oceans too. And the blue economy approach precisely refers to the sustainable and integrated development of economic sectors in healthy oceans. It has exactly that lens. And just to give a few examples, and I'd also like to link back to what Anya was saying earlier on, that we are now looking at COVID-19, obviously, all of us, as a priority. But again, if we use a blue lens for the recovery funding that is being spent right now, one can already do things that are good for the ocean. So one example, one might want to do large labor-intensive or infrastructure-intensive schemes because governments have an interest in ramping up employment since so many people have been affected. Well, one can do that by building cement seawalls, for instance, in countries that need that, depending on how their coasts are doing. But one can also have the same effects or better effects by planting mangroves or by looking at how to recover the reefs. And that is also very labor intensive, and it also puts money into people's pockets. So there are ways of getting to more sustainability for all, for the ocean, but also for the economy. And then, of course, as the minister was saying, looking forward on tech and on the larger sectors, again, there are things that we have to think of, because if we continue with the overfishing we have, then it will affect eventually the entire food chain and the surrounding environment. But if we look at how we can curb overfishing, we have data and studies that show very clearly that in the end you will have a higher economic income. One of our reports, it's called Sunken Billions, that came out a couple of years ago, shows how much money we are actually foregoing because of overfishing. So again, in the long run, it takes us to more prosperity. And then the last one, I'm personally I'm full of hope, let's say, about offshore energy developments, because it's so linked to the climate crisis and solution to the climate crisis. Now, if you do it in the wrong location, you could expect to observe disrupted migration patterns, increased coastal erosion, knock-on effects on tourism, on artisanal fisher folk, and so on. But if you do it the right way, then you can have both the positive impacts, and you can have ocean health and community and social health. So it depends on how we put it all together, and then we can get to that goal.
Wonderful, thank you. Catherine, did you want to say something? I noticed you've unmuted, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a comment that Karin made, talking about putting wealth in pockets. I think one of the recommendations that I really like as a priority area is putting the resources in the right pockets. You know, one of the areas that the illegal and unregulated fisheries, that's something that is a global challenge and issue, and Canada's taken a leadership role looking at ghost gear, managing some of those very challenging fisheries to get ahead of. You've mentioned sustainable energy. The other piece is ocean transport. You know, that is going to continue. So decarbonizing fleets, making sure that the vessels have the right technology. And again, those are great innovation and commercialization opportunities. But these are the kinds of really specific areas that I think the high-level panel will be able to contribute for all governments so that we can move ahead on. Anyway, thanks.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Let's move on to ocean equity and ocean finance. We know that for an ocean economy to be truly sustainable, it needs to put people at its center, it needs to ensure full participation, and it must also include investments in climate resilient infrastructure. Karin, perhaps I could ask you if you have some thoughts you'd like to share on that topic.
Yes, indeed. It's in a way, these are two different things, and yet they are connected. If you look at equity, one of the things that we have embedded in our policies is to really look at all stakeholders in all the investments that we make with countries anywhere in the world. We have a particular gender policy, for instance, where we explicitly must aim in all our investments to not only look at the female side of the gender equation, but really looking at gender parity and identifying the gaps that might occur or that do exist when one has investments. And that is especially important in the blue economy, because as I said in the beginning, there's 40% of all jobs are really female jobs, and that is often forgotten. And so one has to invest as much in the value chain and in trade and supporting there as in other parts, for instance, in fisheries. So the other part that is very important is indigenous communities, indigenous rights, local rights, and I think that will become incredibly important also in the context of overall planning activities, and to bring in stakeholders as we are mandated in the World Bank, but as countries and governments also do, and the minister was pointing that out, to start that process. That is really very important, to bring in the diverse stakeholders everywhere. Now then, on ocean finance, as in so many other activities nowadays, public finance alone is not sufficient. We know that. And so the question is how to design policies that also let the private sector come in and set the sustainability parameters around that, so that we get to all the good things that we were discussing earlier. So these two parts, they belong together, because you don't just want to get any type of investment, you want to have forward-looking sustainable investment.
Thank you. Minister Jordan, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that, here in Canada, we're looking at developing our ocean economy, of course, in partnership with First Nations. They've been stewards of the ocean for a millennium. We're going to make sure that we continue to work with them. And of course, we've just recently launched the first Indigenous-led Coast Guard auxiliary on the west coast of British Columbia just this past month. And when we talk about gender, if we would have had this panel 10 years ago, would we have had the same faces around the table? And I would say we wouldn't have. So not only to have, as Karin had said, women involved in the industries, but also women in the leadership roles is extremely important, because they bring a diverse voice. But, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of other challenges. I could go on about gender for a long time, I'm sorry. But there's all kinds of other challenges that you know, are facing women from getting into these roles. So things like childcare, you know, I mean, and making sure that we develop strategies that address those concerns as well, so that women can play an active, equal role in the you know, in the oceans economy, because it's such a driver for us, and it should be all of us that are benefiting from it. And then, of course, with regards to ocean finance, and particularly with the you know, the smaller ocean states, and working with them, you know, sometimes there's the ability to help build capacity in those smaller areas outside of finance, with regards to things like we've had our conservation and protection work with smaller island states on how to, you know, best monitor things like that. Those are all programs that help bring knowledge. You know, it's about sharing what we have, as well as investing in what is needed.
Great, thank you. Anya, did you want to add anything? I know within OFI, we've certainly been thinking a lot about Indigenous engagement and gender equity as well, but particularly Indigenous engagement is a challenge.
Yes, it's certainly something we've put a lot of energy into, and I think we're seeing the benefit of some healthy conversations starting, but it is a long-term investment, and it's a long conversation. I guess the other thing what we've really noticed is what they call in the jargon intersectionality, which is that a lot of our Indigenous champions are women. And when we raise women's issues or equity issues with our Indigenous champions, sometimes the response is, can't think about it. It's, I'm fighting for my people. I'm fighting for equity for an underrepresented group. I can't be a feminist at the same time. And so it's really interesting how those conversations, as you get deeper into them, you realize, I don't think it's random that the four of us on this panel are white women. And I think that there's a long way to go for racial equity. And as you mentioned, the interconnectedness is so important. So for example, when you're talking about the jobs in developing nations, the only way that we're going to get any equity in those areas is to make sure that women are educated and that they are safe. So we get into this whole other, you know, all the other SDGs that impinge upon the ocean. And so it becomes kind of a passionate issue. And you know what? I had a question for Karin, which to me, it seems as if we're all talking about, well, we believe that economic gain, you know, economic strength and community strength or people strength can go together. A lot of the conversations we have, though, are a little bit siloed, where sometimes the conservation community thinks of anything regarding economics as kind of, well, oh, that's going to be taking. And the economic conversation is often, oh, well, conservation, well, that's, you know, that's going to undermine my ability to run my business. So how do we bring that, you know, that's an edgy conversation, and one that needs to be carefully brokered. I'm just wondering, both Karin and Minister Jordan, do you have comments on how can we bring that conversation to greater strength to overcome some of these, I think, historical barriers?
It's an interesting question, but I think there has been a lot of change in the last 10 to 20 years. It used to be exactly as you said, that there was conservation or economic development, and that it was really quite different groups. And we saw that at the time, both in the ocean space, but also in the forest space, very clearly. And what has happened in the meantime, I find that most of our interlocutors, be it certainly the governments, but also local communities, be it non-governmental organizations, have fully come to understand that there is an interconnectedness, and that if you're a community, you need to live, you need to prosper, and you need to survive. And in that sense, you need to be able to sustainably manage and use your assets. What we have been doing a lot in my practice at the World Bank is to drive analytical studies that show how, if you manage your assets, your natural capital, be it blue or green natural capital, if you manage it wisely, how it can create jobs, what kinds of multipliers there are if you get jobs, and if you create jobs, and how you productively use your assets. The example of fisheries, for instance, is one of them. If you conserve for a while, you bring down the overfishing, then actually you will benefit more afterwards than what you're benefiting now when you have a race to the bottom. And at this moment, I don't sense this dichotomy anymore, that automatically it is conservation against economy or the other way around. It's still a while to go in the granularity, in the details, but we now have many examples from across the world where governments and local communities have applied that and are doing really well.
Great, thank you. Minister Jordan.
Yes, thanks. And thank you, Anya. I think that's a really good conversation that we need to expand on, actually, because, you know, I do still see, as you said earlier, I think when someone says, well, you know, we need to protect this, everyone automatically thinks, well, here's an MPA, you're going to put an MPA in, and everyone automatically thinks when there's an MPA, there's no more fishing, there's no more activity. And we found that, you know, that's making a success of an MPA builds it from the ground up, and with the community, with the industry, with the partners, everyone at the table. That's how it has to go forward. But also, I think that there's so much when it comes to marine spatial planning that can offer us such a great ways to talk to people. And I guess, you know, I mean, I think someone explained marine spatial planning to me in the best way possible. And that was like, just think of it as planning, as how you plan your community or your city or your town. And this is where industry goes. And this is where your green spaces. And this is where your, you know, so it's developing the ocean in a way that meets the needs of communities. And I think that communicating that is going to be part of the challenge as we go forward, that it's not about shutting things down. It's not about making sure that or stopping anybody from doing what they need to do to grow their economy. It's about doing it in a way so that we can continue to do it. It's about making sure that we have fishing for generations to come. It's about making sure that we have, you know, the ability to develop the things we need to battle climate change. Like you had said, I think it was actually Dr. Kemper had said with regards to offshore energy, or those are all things that are going to have to be part of the conversation, but they have to be done in a way that communities recognize that it's not going to impact their livelihoods, that it's there to actually support their livelihoods. And I think, Anya, you also made a comment with regards to COVID and you know, that this is the crisis that we're in, and, you know, this is our number one priority. But I honestly believe that because we're in one crisis doesn't mean we can ignore another crisis. And the climate crisis is absolutely got to still be addressed, even though we're dealing with all of the challenges with COVID. I think it actually gives us an opportunity to look at new ways to, as we've said, build back bluer, and making sure that the ocean is part of that building back plan.
Great. Thank you, Minister Jordan. We've had a really quite lively discussion, which is great, although we're running out of time. Maybe a quick question to start things off. This is from Kelsey Scarphone, and the question is for Minister Jordan. Could you elaborate on the important role of conserving 30% of our oceans in Canada as a key pillar to the Blue Economic Strategy?
Absolutely. You know, I mean, when we first started In 2015, when we were first elected, we had less than 1% of Canada's oceans protected. We set a goal to protect 10 by 2020. We've hit close to 14. This is ongoing challenge. It's not an easy thing to do because it does take a lot of consultation, a lot of work, but it's extremely important that we continue to look at where we need to conserve, to make sure that we're addressing concerns in communities that are impacted by these conservation targets. We've seen on the West Coast, for example, in British Columbia, there's a number of communities that are actively engaged who desperately want to see more protection because they recognize how important it is to the species, that the ecosystems and the habitats that are in those areas. These are, like I said, they're sometimes very difficult conversations to have in a number of communities, but we also have communities like in the north with the Inuit who are, very much engaged in marine conservation and marine protection. They want to be part of the conversation, and we're going to continue to work with all of them to make sure that we hit those goals that are imperative to making sure that we can continue to sustain the ocean.
Wonderful, thank you. We have another question that I think is directed towards you, Minister. A sustainable blue economy and ocean must include sustainable seafood production, according to the panel. Sustainable seafood production is already a focal point in the conservation plan. Could you comment on what Government of Canada is doing to intertwine the two, conservation of oceans with sustainable seafood farming and harvesting?
Absolutely, and I think I did touch on this a little bit when we were first talking about how important aquaculture is to feeding the world. As I said, 50% of seafood that's consumed is from farmed from aquaculture. We just need to make sure that those are built in a sustainable way, that we're engaging with the communities that are impacted. We know that First Nations, again, Indigenous communities, have been extremely involved in the aquaculture industry in a number of areas. They receive impact benefits from them. We want to make sure that they can continue to have those. And we're going to continue to work with industry to make sure that they have all of that they need in order to grow their industry, but also make sure that we're dealing with the environment and all of the things that people are maybe concerned about. Of course, we make our decisions based on science. As Anya has said, the science is extremely important to us, and we want to continue to work with the industry to make sure that aquaculture is sustainable for the future.
Great, thank you so much. The next question, I think, comes from Anthony Charles. Dr. Kemper makes the key point about long-term versus short-term trade-offs. There are many complexities in understanding the possible policy responses to linking ocean protection, climate change, ocean livelihoods, and poverty food issues. So can you talk a little bit about that, and particularly the balance there between social and ecological, if you like, challenges?
Yes, thanks. It's really a very good question, because I think that many governments are really grappling with how to get that balance right, because it's like many of the important political and institutional issues, when one wants to bring about change, there are different angles to that. If we take the example, for instance, of subsidies, there's a lot of subsidies both on fossil fuels, as we know, and they have a lot of impacts on climate, but also on ecosystem health in many ways, both on oceans and also on land. Now, the subsidies are beneficial to a lot of people, but have these effects. So one thing that one can think about is, if one knows who is benefiting from these subsidies, but it's leading to detrimental effects, what about thinking how to shift the subsidies? Most people think about elimination of subsidies, be it for fisheries or be it for transportation fuel or all kinds of things in the ocean economy, but applies also on the land economy. But what about shifting them? What about rerouting them in a different way in order to bring about better decisions by stakeholders. And I think that a number of countries are going that way. I think the UK just recently announced that it's going to shift its agricultural subsidies towards greener activities. And that's the type of thing that a lot of governments are thinking through, because it's obvious that you cannot have very detrimental social effects. So how can you get the outcome you want without having an impact on the people that actually have built their economic livelihoods around this, or industries or economic sectors? And that's, I think, the way that we need to think about. There's still a lot to do, but there's also examples around of how to do it.
Thank you. And I see lots of nodding around the panel, which is great. We're almost out of time. I mean, we pretty much are. Is there a final comment you'd like to share, Karin, and then Minister Jordan?
Just to say again how encouraged we are at the World Bank that the high-level panel has come out with this range of excellent reports, and that are really forward-looking for the blue economy, going way beyond what one could have expected. And we are really, really honored to be part of it, and very honored to work closely with Canada, especially in the context of pro-blue.
Wonderful. Thank you. Minister Jordan.
I just want to thank everyone today for the discussion. I think we could have done this for a lot longer. There were probably a lot of questions that people still have, but you know, I mean, I think that this is a starting point. Although we've done a lot of work in oceans and a lot of on our blue economy, there's a lot more to be done. You know, as I said early on, we're going to be opening up the blue economy strategy for consultations early in the new year, and I look forward to great conversations as we build that strategy to make sure that we are, you know, doing everything we can to not only protect our oceans, but also grow our ocean economy. And I want to thank Catherine and the team at Ocean Frontier Institute for hosting this today.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Anya, would you like to take us across the goal line and say farewell?
What an interesting conversation. Too bad it's so short. Thank you very much, Minister Jordan and Dr. Kemper, for joining us today, and to my colleagues at the OFI, Paul and Catherine, and also to the team of technical specialists behind the scenes. We thank you all very much for making this run smoothly. So without further ado, on behalf of the Ocean Frontier Institute, we so appreciate you joining us today. We're excited to work with you going forward, and we are very, very much looking forward to joint actions as we go into the future.
We'd love to hear any feedback you have. This is the second of a regular series, so keep an eye on your email for the next event in 2021. We wish you all a very happy and healthy holiday and Christmas season.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you again.
Thank you,
everyone. Take care, everybody. And thanks to our audience.